Hey, Walter Sorrells back with more tips for the knife maker. Today, making a machinist's jack. So today we're going to make one of these, a machinist's jack. A machinist's jack is a little shop tool that's really handy for all kinds of things around the knife shop. They're really made for supporting work on a mill, but they can do all kinds of other things, including supporting knives in a drilling vise. So a lot of times I do projects that I've really thought through and that I know exactly what I'm doing. This is not going to be one of them. What you're going to be watching here really is me just kind of making up a project as I go along. So you'll get to follow along and see me as I do things right and when I screw up too. All right, let's jump right on into it. I'm using a piece of 1-inch round 01 oil hardenable steel, a couple of stainless steel 3/8/16 bolts and matching nuts, some drills, and a tap. And that's about it. Plus, a lathe. I do a really wide range of videos and I try to show people kind of a lot of different ways of doing things. So sometimes I'm just going to do projects that take a little bit more heavyweight equipment. Anyway, after cutting a couple of roughly 2-inch long slugs, I'll chuck one up in my lathe and face it off. If I were planning this carefully, I'd use more suitable and sharper tools, but like I said, that would not be in the spirit of the project. I'm using these kind of crummy, semi-dull, triangular inserts. By the way, if you're not so much of a make-it-up-as-you-go-along guy as me, I'll make some plans in the next few days and post them on my Patreon page where they'll be available for all patrons of the channel. Once I've got the part faced, I'll spot the hole with a carbide spotting drill, then switch over to a 5/16 drill, the correct drill for tapping a 3/8/16 thread. If you're just getting started with this, it's always important that you use the correct size drill for tapping. And sometimes those drills are kind of odd sizes. If you ever run into a situation where you need to drill a hole for tapping and you don't know what size to use, and you're in sub-Saharan Africa where you can't look it up on your iPhone, or Montana, well, here are some pro machinist shortcuts. The correct drill size is always shown on a chart hanging on the wall in the darkest, least accessible part of your shop. Or you can search your memory for the last oddball letter-sized drill that you snapped and didn't buy a replacement for, and that's guaranteed to be the correct size that you need. In this case, by some miracle, I actually had the correct size drill. Now the bane of my existence, tapping. Of course, I don't have some super great $100 spiral flute carbide Kennametal tap. I have this, a Home Depot special. There are always guys telling me about easy ways of tapping. You put it in your mill and you run the tap down under power and this and that. Yeah, if you can do that in tool steel with a Home Depot tap and not snap your tap, more power to you. Here's what I did. I chucked it up in my drill chuck, turned the lathe down to its slowest speed, which is 60 RPM, lubed everything up to kingdom come, and this. Which actually is not a disaster. I was actually expecting this to happen. The tap didn't break, and I've got a good true thread established because I've fed it in 2 or 3 turns, and I know that it's perfectly on center. But the rest of it is going to go by hand. Thusly. Did I mention how much I hate tapping? So anyway, I just go until I bury the tap in the part, being careful, of course, to stop before I break the tap off in there. Now, those among you with sharp eyes will notice that this here tap is a lot shorter than this here part. But ideally, I want to be able to run the screw all the way down to the base of the jack. No problem. We'll just flip it around and run a 3/8" drill down the pipe until we hit the threads. This will relieve the far end of the pipe, giving clearance for the bolt threads. I actually measured this, believe it or not. But as long as you leave plenty of thread to support the screw, you're fine. In this case, I've got over 3/4 of an inch of screw threads, so that's plenty. We're not jacking up houses with it. In fact, footnote on using these things, you don't want to jack the snot out of something when you're supporting it, or you'll actually cause the work to deflect and you'll end up milling out of true surfaces. You want just enough to keep the part from chattering. Anyway, now that we've relieved the base end of the pipe, we'll put a taper in the business end of the jack. I'm adjusting the compound rest to 11 degrees, a number chosen after careful, randomly. This taper looks cool and all, but there's actually a purpose to it. In cases where you want to get really close to the part, you'll have some working room around the jack if you taper the shank this way. Finally, I'll do some chamfering and smoothing and sanding. I don't have to mention, I hope, that monkeying around in the vicinity of a whirling chuck has to be done with great care. A moment's inattention can turn you into four-finger Bob. Bolts are not exactly precision parts, so here I'm just facing the bolt so that the jack face will be perpendicular to the bore of the jack and will bear evenly on the work it's supporting. Now I'll heat treat the jacks. I'm doing this because I'm a knife maker and I'd heat treat a chewing gum wrapper if I could. Now, high quality tools of this sort are typically heat treated, but frankly, unheat treated, this thing would probably last way the hell past my lifetime. But big deal, unheat treated gizmos are for sissies. So, into the forge, heat it to critical temp, then into heat treating oil. You're not much of a knife maker if your hand's not engulfed in flames every now and then. That's why they make Kevlar gloves. Into the tempering oven at 475 Fahrenheit for an hour. Then it's another round of polishing with wet or dry sandpaper. And we're done. I left all the mill scale around the bottom of the jack where I was holding it in the chuck. So it just came off the lathe that way, and I was going to turn it around and clean off the bottom, but then I thought, it looks kind of cool, so I kept it that way. The basic idea of the jack is that you screw the jack face up until it meets the work, then you snug down the bolt to the body of the jack so that the jack won't vibrate out of place. So here's the jack at work. Let's say we're doing a little milling on this aluminum plate, but the plate is much longer than the vise is wide. Hanging it off like this can create all kinds of potential hazards. So we throw in a jack, problem solved. So I hope you had fun with this. You know, I'm a big believer in making your own shop tools, not really because it saves money or anything, but you know, sometimes it just gets a little tiring just making knives over and over, and it's really fun to just go out to the shop and do things for the reasons that most of us got started in this world in the first place, which is to have fun. So this project is really more about having fun than it is about, you know, making a perfect tool. Thanks for watching, guys. If you feel like you got something out of this video, don't forget to subscribe. Also, click on the link to Patreon for a great way to give back to the channel. Plus, check me out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Links in the description. If you want something sharp and pointy, maybe a gift for yourself or one of the cooler people in your life, check out my Tactics Armory website and pick up one of our tactical or outdoor knives. And finally, if you want to learn to make hamones or Japanese swords, check out WalterSorrellsBlades.com, where you can find videos about how I make hamones, as well as forging, mounting, polishing, and fittings for Japanese swords. Thanks, and see you soon.